Hey everybody, welcome to the Slick Tree Podcast. I'm your host, Colby Langford. The point of this show is to help improve ourselves as dogmen and to raise the quality of the dogs on the end of our lead. So let's settle in, turn the volume up, and let's see if we can't learn a trick or two together from our guests. Hey everybody, you are listening to the Slick Tree Podcast, and I'm your host, Colby Langford, and today we have got Clarence Smith with us. How you doing today, Clarence?
I'm doing great, Colby.
Yeah, I
I'm ready to talk dogs and breeding and training and whatever you want.
Well, that's what I like to hear. That's what it's all about. So let's just jump into it. Now, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Honestly, I don't know that much about you, so this will be for me and the audience both.
Okay, well, I live in Goodrich, Michigan. I'm originally from northeastern Kentucky, and gradually worked my way north. Ended up working for 35 years for General Motors as a mechanical engineer on engine components, crankshafts and blocks and pistons and rods and all that stuff. And was fortunate enough to retire in 2023. And um, I've always had squirrel dogs. In fact, one of my earliest memories was I think it was actually I was three because of some other things I remembered when I was four. So I think it was three, and I was on my dad's shoulders, um, walking through the woods with a feist dog that we had. She was just a few months older than me, and we had her until she was about 14. My family had always squirrel hunted. In fact, my grandfather William Garvin, he had his own line of feist dogs, and that dog that I grew up with, she was one of the last from that line of dogs. But I always had feist dog. Always had Me and Dad always had squirrel dogs, and Dad was always trying something, getting a dog to try because it was so hard at that time to find a dog with tree. And uh, the funny thing about squirrel dogs in eastern Kentucky was I never saw a cur dog until I don't know, I think I was about 22, something like that. It seemed like almost everything in eastern Kentucky at the time was a feist or an elk hound. Elk hounds kind of became popular in the 70s. And but I never I never I never seen a cur till I was about 22, which would have been in the mid 80s. And that's strange because the Hunt brothers were there in Greenup County where I grew up. Billy Joe and June was my dad had a piece of property down on Brushy Creek, and where June lived, and but I never seen a cur dog. I didn't know those guys, and till probably in my 20s, and then I got a cur. I think my first cur dog was in the 90s. I worked for Saturn division of GM first, and I uh, I was down at the Saturn plant, and I met this guy named Willard Hughes, who was originally from southern Indiana, and he had a picture of a dog on a tailgate with some squirrels. I was there very early, and I walked by his desk, and I told the guys I was with, I said, I want to meet that guy when he comes in. They said, sure. So I ended up meeting Willard, and he said, hey, I've got a litter of pups. It's the third litter from this cross, and I'll give you one. And as it turned out, it really wasn't a cur or a full cur. It was his little dog was half English and half red Spitz, and the father was a Kimmer, She looked just like a little street bred dog, but she showed no evidence of the red spits, but she was a real tree dog, and that's when me and Dad kind of got into cur dogs a little bit, and then but I kind of stuck with the Feist for a long time. I would have a cur dog, but I was messing around with my Feist dogs and trying to work on them, and and then kind of back around 2010, kind of went. I guess you'd say kind of predominantly or almost all in with cur dogs. So that's kind of my background.
Tell us about what you're hunting right now.
Well, I'm hunting some dogs that I've been breeding. Not sure where to start with this. Back around, well, I'm gonna start a little bit earlier, Colby. We've talked before. I'm gonna kind of get into this. I was working with the Feist dogs, and I told you this story, but I got moved into this group with these other people back in the mid 2000s, and there was this older man. He was born in Germany, and he had immigrated over here and worked for General Motors, and he was because he was a native German speaker, they would send him over to Germany for things, and because General Motors has owned Opel since like 2000 or 1910, something like that. And anyway, he started telling me a story where he had gone over to the Frankfurt Auto Show, and he had stepped out of a presentation to get some lunch, and it had an animal show in this venue, and they had all the winners in cages. And he had got a brat. He was standing there looking at this picture or this pigeon in a cage, and he said out loud, he said, "That's the poorest excuse for a pigeon I've ever seen." And he heard a voice behind him say, "I agree, you're right." So there's this little guy, unassuming guy, and they were talking pigeons, because one of the things about a lot of the Europeans is, and there's a lot of immigrants, European immigrants in the Detroit area, is they like to race pigeons, and they race homing pigeons. You basically put all your pigeons in cages, and they'll truck them, or from here they take them down to Illinois or somewhere and turn them loose, and then they'd race back. Well, he liked doing it, but he wasn't doing very well. And he and this guy sat down there, and they were talking and talking about pigeons. And finally, it's time to get back to work. And he said, that guy just handed him his business card. Said, "If you ever want to talk about pigeons, give me a call." And again, this was over in Frankfurt, Germany, and he lived here. And this was in the 80s. So you can remember what long distance phone calls were here. It was very expensive to make phone calls long distance to Germany, or to Hungary. So this guy lived in Hungary, because what happened was Arnold went back to his. He just put the card back in his shirt, and next morning got up. There were newspaper from Frankfurt newspaper shoved under the door, and he opens it up, and it says Hungarian geneticist wins awards. And it was this little guy. He was world famous. He was world famous. He ran the British steeplechase horse breeding program, and he had bred these hogs with an extra rib on each side, so it's 2 extra pork chops. And he was world famous, and he ran this institute that employed about 1,000 people. And so Arnold said, "Well, I'm gonna contact him." So he comes back, and they started talking on the phone. And finally, that guy said, "Hey, won't you just come over and visit for a week?" And so he did that 2 times. He went over and he showed him all of his genetics equipment, and he showed him the genes for speed and endurance and stuff like that. And Arnold said, "Well, that's great, but I don't have that equipment." He says, "Well, you don't really need it." And he told him how to get around it. And so he started breeding pigeons, and it took a little while. He had a few instances where he messed up, had to back up and start over. But after he got some inertia, got it going, in a few years, he would send 30 birds to Illinois, and he would win 27 or 26, 27 of the top 30 spots. And he was making more money racing pigeons than he was as a level 8 engineer at General Motors. Ultimately, he's winning so much that they tried to kick him out of the club. It had a lawsuit. He won it and everything. But anyway, I started talking to him because I was working on these feist dogs, and it's not exactly the same because, for one thing, you can evaluate a bird in 6 months, where a dog might be 2 years or something like that. And it's a lot harder to keep a bunch of dogs than it is a bunch of pigeons. But anyway, I started working on it. And anyway, it was crazy. I remember thinking, it'll take me 5 generations probably to get what I was looking for. And it actually, I surprised myself. It took 3. I ended up with a really good dog, and I was really happy with, and I was rolling with the feist. And at the same time, I had a really nice dog I liked out of Mountain Jackson's Big Time. He was from a half brother, half sister cross. Female was also out of Mountain Jackson. I really liked him, and there was going to be this OMCBA hunt down in South Shore, Kentucky, not far from where I grew up, where my parents lived. And I was going to go down to this and take my dog. I'd never been to OMCBA event, so I was going to go down there, but I'd gotten into a porcupine with this dog, and it ultimately killed him about 2 weeks before this hunt, and he died. And so I went down to the event, and I was like, wow, it was a lot of fun. It was totally different than a lot of the feist events I'd been to at the time. So I was like, I want to get back. I think I want to spend more time with the cur dogs because it just was a lot more fun. And so I started looking around, and I was going to, this is getting back to your question about what I'm hunting. I didn't really focus. I started looking around for curs where a place to jump in again. And I was at the time I was thinking I'd like to get something out of burlap, but they were bringing burlap to everything, and I didn't have anybody to really talk to at the time to find out what females were the good ones and stuff like that. I had a lot going on up here. So at the same time, I have a good friend down in Indiana, George Danielson, and George had a cur out of Smoking Bullet that I really liked. Still really think highly of that dog. He called Haas. And at the same time, George had told me he had gone with this dog. She was like 6 months old, and that just really impressed him as a tree dog. She was getting treed, holding pressure, holding gun pressure. He just couldn't believe she was just such an impressive cur tree dog. He said if he ever got a chance, he'd try to get a pup out of her. Well, it didn't work getting a pup out of her, but several years later, he bought her, and her name was Janie, Rock Creek Jane. And I went with her, and she was an impressive cur tree dog. And by that time, he told me that the fellow who had owned her had been so impressed with her that he bought her mother and sister, and they were the same way. And I thought, well, this is kind of the way I'd work with the feist. you start with a strong tree dog, and then you work from there. And she definitely had strong tree genetics because her mother and sisters had it too. So I told George I'd like a pup, and he got me one. I called her Dixie, and very strong tree dog, really really nice little dog. But I didn't really. While Haas had great hunt, I really liked him. Janie's hunt was nothing special, and I Dixie's hunt was. I would say that was where she had room for improvement. So I started looking for dogs that could provide hunt. And at the same time, this is going back before Hummer was well known. They were bringing him up to the South Shore Club, and I had a good friend, Jay Sobchuk, that was going there all the time, and he told me about this dog had a lot of hunt. And I didn't really, that was kind of before I got Dixie, but by the time that first litter out of Hummer were rolling, I asked Jay, I said, how they do? He says, oh, they hunt great. I said, okay. So ultimately bred Dixie to Hummer, and it was a great cross. Raised 7, all 7 treed. Almost all of them stayed with their original owners. They just loved them, and they weren't competition hunters, but they loved them. And I kept 2. I called one Pip, one Ted, and that's kind of where I I'll call the starting point for my dogs. And I um, um, again, I kept looking at them. I had a few of those pups that had the kind of hunt I was looking for, but in general, the hunt was still probably their weak point. So I started looking for dogs with hunt, and um, that kind of leads to a cross that a lot of people are very familiar with, the one that had Naylor and Ben and Junior Maynard's Deuce dog. I've got a couple good females out of the crosses when I made the cross with Porcupine Mountain Bud. And ironically, that also goes back to George too. I was talking to George. And I said, "Hey, I really I want to find a dog that's got was just a natural hunter, just from the time it was a pup." And he just didn't even pause. He said, "Well, I so happened I went with a dog that really impressed me. I went with when it was like 5 months old, and when it was about 10 months old, and it just had big hunt just as a pup." He says, "Lucky for you, it's up there near you." And it was Adam O'Donnell's Bud dog. So okay, so I called Adam, and he had just sold Bud, so Bud was not in Michigan. He didn't own him, but he was nice enough to allow me to breed with a straw semen he had done at Never Gone in Indiana, and I bred Pip to Bud. We got 7 pups. One of them died, but we had 6, and I would say 3 of the 6, all 6 of those treed. 3 of them had competition style hunt. 3 average hunt, good tree dogs, but more average hunt. 3 had big hunt and drive to get treed. We made it again. Had 5 pups. That's the cross that Deuce was from, and my Libby dog. So that cross went real well, and then I've got 2 of those females from that cross I still keep that for breeding purposes, and then since then I've been breeding Ted, and I've been hunting pups off of Ted. I'm hunting one right now called Prime. That's out of Ted, and a sister to Image. Her name is Twister. So that's kind of long story, long route to get to answer your question, but that's what I'm hunting right now.
All right, so to get back to the pigeons, I guess what I'm
Yep.
dying to find out is I want to hear some more of the secrets of what that geneticist like. Can you go into what his theory, or I guess not theories, but what he found and how he was doing in getting the
Yeah,
results?
yeah, I kind of got off track there. Anyway, like I said with the feist, it only took me. I thought it would take 5 or 6 generations. It took about three to get to kind of, to start to get to where I was wanting to be with the feist, and then I really thought that it'd be about the same with the curs. I'd learned a lot, but what the geneticist told Arnold was um, that you didn't really need the equipment. There would be some kind of physical feature that would go along with the genetic trait, and that if you took great notes, you took good notes, you could identify them when they were young and save yourself some time. And Arnold did, and he said if he had a red pigeon that would hatch, he would just call it immediately. If he found one that had a black toenail, the middle toe, he would keep it, or if it had a white fleck in the corner of its eye, it was going to be a you know a possible good bird. And so I started working with the dogs, and I started seeing that with the feist. I started seeing some things, and I could pick them. I did some experiments. I raised one cross twice and I took a pup that did not have the traits, and sure enough, it did not have the features, and it did not have the traits. So it worked, and but there are traits, and with my dogs, I'm not going to say what they are because at the end of the day, it's going to be different depending on the background of your dogs. There's so much for variation in these cur dogs, and depending on the line. But you guys got to take great notes and start from when they're born, little features, and write them down so you can, kind of get a database, and then it will speed things up. Um, the other thing I think about, my theory on breeding dogs is that um, you got to take your dog, the one you're going to potentially breed, and you got to be really honest about. You got to break it down into different um, um, traits: tree, um, mouth, range, hunting speed. You can break it down however you want, but you got to be pretty honest about it. And then you got to be honest about where the holes are in that dog. And then here's the real key for me is that, and I used to kind of get myself in a little bit of trouble in terms of kind of creating an awkward moment, because I'd be talking to somebody and they would say they were going to breed their dog, and they would be breeding it to a world champion. And I would say, well, why are you breeding to that dog? And it wasn't anything a negative at all. It was like, I'm thinking about, when I'm breeding my dogs, I'm thinking about, I've got a purpose. I'm breeding this dog for hunt, or this dog for this, or whatever. And I'd ask them, why are you breeding to that dog? And they would just kind of be speechless, like, well, it's self-evident. He's a world champion. He's whatever. And I think it's where a lot of guys get themselves in trouble. They breed to the dog. He's obviously a really good dog, but his weak point might be the same weak point as their female. In the end of the day, they don't get anything. And I just think when I stopped doing that kind of breeding, and a lot of times you're not breeding to a world champion or a superstar. You're breeding to a dog that offers you what you need for your female, for your line of dogs. In my case, I would keep breeding for hunt. I had plenty of tree power. I'd breed for hunt. You know, but you got to break the dog down into pieces and look for the weak point in your dog and just go look for a dog that fills that void. And that's really probably, since I've been working with the cur dogs, the combination of looking for some features and then breeding for specific traits has helped me more than anything. So that's kind of my theory or my philosophy on breeding squirrel dogs.
I guess my next question for you is whenever you're selecting, like say you've kept a female.
Yep.
How are you say you're wanting to make sure a dog doesn't have similar holes? Are you always going to go hunt with the dog you're looking at?
Yes, you either want to hunt with it yourself, or you want a friend, someone who's on the same page with you, someone who, if they say something, you understand exactly what they're saying.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you ask them a question about that dog, they know exactly what you're saying. In my case, during this conversation, I brought up George Danielson and Jay Sobchuk. We're on the same page. If I asked this question, they knew what I was asking. And like when I asked George about, I told him I was looking for a dog that just had natural from the time it was a pup hunt. He knew of one. When I talked to Jay about ultimately Hummer, that was before he was so well known. He said, "Oh yeah, that dog's got the right kind of hunt." And so you need somebody to go with the dog, because so often, if you were there looking at the dog, you might just not be interested in it. There's something about it it just doesn't interest you. It's got some quirk maybe that it's not even doesn't even affect its performance, but you don't like it.
Mm-hmm.
So you do need somebody to go with it, or go with the dog, or you go with the dog. See it.
A lot of people that have stud dogs, it's hard to get what their faults really are out of them.
Well, I think a lot of times, maybe this stud dog owner, if he didn't raise the dog, he doesn't even know what the faults are, because a lot of dogs are being trained to do things. They're not necessarily natural genetic traits. A lot of treeing things, treeing traits. You hear about dogs that were just naturally very loose and very, took a long time to tree, but they could locate game, but they weren't solid tree dogs, and they were trained to tree. Well, that's great if you're going to a USDC hunt maybe, and you just want to win. But when it comes to breeding litters of good dogs, that dog might not be the right choice. You know what I'm saying? That dog is not a natural tree dog, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Why would you want to breed to that dog? You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So that's a lot of the problem. A lot of times the owner of the stud dog doesn't even know the history of the dog. So you got to do some research.
So earlier I noticed that you said that one of the things when you were starting was you wanted something with a lot of natural tree power. Was that kind of stemming from how even earlier than that you said that you guys had a hard time finding feists in Kentucky that would tree? Or
well, yeah, it comes from that. It comes from, if you go back to like even the 2000s, it was hard to find an OMCVA bred cur dog that would tree. There was kind of a crisis during the early 2000s with cur dogs treeing. And then I guess the third thing is that if a dog doesn't tree, it's just a dog. I really think that tree dogs, you have to always start with tree, maintain your tree instinct, and work from there. Because if you don't, if the dog doesn't tree, it's just a dog. But if you got a dog that will tree and it only hunts 75 yards, there's somebody will want that dog. Somebody will be very happy with a dog that doesn't hunt very wide. But if that dog hunts like crazy, but he won't tree, runs out there 800 yards, hits the tree 10 times and leaves, that dog's worthless. So I always I'm always thinking, maintain my tree power, uh, and work from there. But always be careful with keeping your tree instinct.
Gotcha.
I mean, it's really kind of used to. It's not so prevalent now, but used to it seemed like you had dogs that were, if they were good tree dogs, they so often they lacked hunt. And if they had great hunt, they lacked tree. Now it's getting easier, and maybe it's just because I'm spending so much last few years. I spent so much time just hunting by myself. I'm hunting with dogs that I'm kind of bred up, and the balance is more what I've been working toward. But it just seemed to be hard to find something in that sweet spot area. But there's been so much happening lately. There's so many. We're really an explosion of great squirrel dogs right now. I've never seen anything like the last 10 years. I mean, 5 years. It seems like guys are breeding up some really nice dogs.
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess let's kind of change gears a little bit, and
Yeah.
so now that we've talked about breeding and genetics and your program on that, so now you've got your pup on the ground. After doing your homework and doing your breedings, what are you going to do with that pup? How are you going to mold this puppy into a squirrel dog? What's your process?
Well, I usually a couple things. I usually keep two pups. Now I'm raising litters, so I can do that. A lot of guys are going to go buy a pup. Maybe they're not going to do it, but be able to do that. But I really have, and maybe it's just maybe I'm off base, but I really think a lot of times puppies are unintentionally imprinted with things that we really don't want them to do. And what I'm getting at is, like you say, a guy gets a little pup and he says he's all excited and he wants to take it for a walk. Well, at the end of the day, when that dog is grown, you don't really want it to. Well, I should say, I don't really want that dog to think that I'm gonna walk it over squirrels. I want it to go hunting. But if you take that little pup by itself, and you walk it all the time, so often I've seen pups that have been imprinted to just stay with the guy. He doesn't even know he's doing it. He's teaching it that without even knowing he's teaching it that. And so that's the reason I keep two pups a lot of times, because if you take two pups together, they're going to go explore together. They're with you, but they're not paying any attention to you. They're just out having a good time, running around, digging, chase a chipmunk or something. So that's the first thing I do. I try not to imprint a dog or teach it to not hunt. That's the first thing. And the other thing is, and I know there's some strong theories on this. You see guys who train their pups a lot of obedience. And I think it goes back to the past when I was having, well, I'd say back to when I was a kid even. It was harder to get dogs to hunt the way I wanted. And I would see guys who would do a lot of obedience training. It seemed like they would take something out of the dogs. I don't. I put the handle on them later. I kind of want them to be wild when they're young, and I put the handle on them later. And then I just, as a puppy, I just take them for walks and in the woods. Um, Hopefully, you've got a dog who's bred to be a squirrel dog, and I don't really do much else. I just seems like I put them where there's some squirrels, and generally anywhere between 3.5 to 5.5 months, they just naturally start treeing. So that's the way I start them. Once they're starting to go get treed and everything, and I start knocking some squirrels to them, I do the basics of I tie them. And one thing I think is really important is to spend time at the tree, especially when they're young. And because if you got a dog, he's got a lot of go, and he trees. You just want to create a habit of the process is that we stop and we're at the tree. We're just going to be patient. We're going to stay here. And a lot of times I'll spend 10 minutes at that tree. It doesn't matter if I see the squirrel walking in. I'm going to walk in. I'm going to tie that pup. I'm going to walk in and out out like I'm looking for the squirrel. I'm going to pet on it. I'm going to talk to it. And I'm just going to create this habit of when we tree, we're going to slow down. We're going to stop. We're going to stay here for a while. And I think that's one of a guy told me about that many, many years ago back in Kentucky, and I've done it, and I see a real benefit in that. He just gives them patience. It kind of just gets them used to slowing down and stopping, and they just get used to staying treed. And, anymore, by the time the dog is, a year old, it's nothing for them to stay treed 30, 40 minutes if the situation arises where you can't get to them. But they're just patient. They just stay treed. So that's a big one. And then as they get a little bit older, even I would say if the pup starts treeing on my walks, say 5 months old, but once they start treeing regularly and they're hunting out a little bit, I'm gonna stop walking them. I will cut them from the road and just kind of encourage them to start going hunting on their own. And then we'll do that for a while, go in to the tree, come back to the truck, and then later we'll start doing some recast from the tree. But I generally just start to encourage them to hunt from the truck without me walking them, and then work into recast.
So did I understand right that you were saying you like to take them when they're pups as a pair? That way they're not paying so much attention to you.
Yep.
How long are you doing that for? Where do you kind of cut off that point where
one of them will start treeing? One of them will start treeing, and they'll be treeing regularly, and then you can't really hunt them together because you don't want to ruin the other one. You don't want the other one, going and just going start to tree with the other one. So at that point, I split them up, and because that's something for guys just getting into training squirrel dogs to keep in mind all the time is be very aware of unintentionally teaching your dog something, because so many things the dog ends up doing, you taught them, unintentionally. So you got to be very careful about unintentionally teaching your pup to do something that later on you don't want them to do. So just think about when you're doing things with your pup. Do I really want this dog to learn this and do this when it's 18 months old?
I myself have been horribly guilty of, like you were saying, essentially training a puppy to
Yep.
walk with me in the woods. Like
Yeah.
I
It
have done that
happens all the
multiple
time.
times.
It happens all the time. And so, okay, let's back up to that. Obviously, sometimes you only have one pup to train. So what do you do? Well, it's not ideal. It's not as good as having two pups. But how do you do it? Well, you still take the pup for a walk, but you let the pup lead the walk. I'll stand there. I'll just stand there. And when that pup wanders out, if he gets out 40 yards, then I might move up. But I'm not going to move the pup. The pup's going to move me.
I hear you.
And that's the way you get around this. And it works. The pup will get used to wandering around. You gotta show a little more patience, because when you got two pups, they're going to get out further much, much quicker. And then you can move up. But you just got to have some patience. You let that pup wander. Finally, you'll get out a little bit, and then you move up. And then you'll stand there, and it'll wander, and then finally you move up. But that's the way around it. I've trained many pups that way, and they were not imprinted with following you or following me. But you just got to be thinking. And this is another thing, Colby. There's a when you're training dogs, training is this again. This is just Clarence Smith's philosophy, but there's a difference between being a hard hunter and training dogs. There's a certain amount that a dog will improve by just having it in the woods, but it'll only improve so much by just being a hard hunter. You kind of, let's say, I don't know, you got to kind of be paying attention to your dog, watching it, and you notice what its weak points are. And then you're going to go out there and you're going to try to strengthen that dog in that weak area. Let's say it doesn't cast well from the truck. Well, why would you go and cast from the truck and then start doing recast for the next 2 hours? Just going and killing squirrels. If the dog's weak casting from the truck, then you cast it from the truck all morning. And you just patiently do that. You're not just out there hunting hard. You have a plan. This dog needs this. This dog is maybe not as patient at the tree as I'd like. Well, you're gonna, instead of going and killing 6 squirrels that day, maybe you're only going to kill 2 or 3, because you're going to spend so much time at the tree. You're going to walk in, you're going to see the squirrel, but you're going to spend 10 minutes at that tree encouraging that pup, and then you're going to knock it to it. And you're just going to, so I guess for guys getting into squirrel dogs is, be aware that being a hard hunter is not going to solve all your problems with your dog, and really be training dogs. It's like I said, a dog will improve a lot just through hard hunting, but there's going to come a point where you're going to have to think, am I going to train dogs today, or am I going to go kill squirrels?
Hunting with intentionality.
Yeah. I mean, that's how you consistently get better dogs, is through training, identifying what your dog needs, and go out there and try to work on it. Don't just go out there and say, I'm going to hunt 8 hours today, and I'm going to hunt 6 days this week, and I'm going to hunt 8 hours a day. And the dog will get better to a point, but then there's going to come a point where if you don't get intentional, the dog's not going to get better.
I hear you. Which I guess that last question I asked you, I jumped a little bit farther forward than I meant to. Let's back up one more step in between there, and let's talk about how whenever you have your litter, what are you doing as far as pup selection? Are you doing any type of testing? Are you doing any type of like scent imprinting on them on the litter? Are you walking them in individual groups and kind of taking notes, or uh, what are you doing to select your pups that you hold back whenever you have a litter?
Well, I don't. I just, if I'm raising the litter, I've got all the pups. I'll turn them out and let them run around, and I'll watch them. And now with my dogs, my line of dogs, again, these are just dogs that, again, when I watch these dogs, I'm thinking about dogs that I've from this line that I've seen and are dead now. We're going back generations. And so I remember what they were like as pups. Like, for example, I from my line of dogs, I will have some pups that will just be little guys, 5 months old, 5 weeks old, I mean, and they'll just look at me in the face and bark at me. They're just like Will Ferrell's dog in Anchorman. He just starts having a conversation with me. Baxter, yeah. Yeah, you ate the cheese? I'm not even mad. I'm impressed. Yeah. Yeah, he's speaking Spanish to him that day. Well, but yeah, I can name dog after dog. It will look at me in the face and just bark at me and look at me in the eye like he's wanting to get my attention. He's not just a barker, but he wants to get my attention. Like my pups, they'll be just little, and they'll stick their nose down in mouse holes around my barn, and you'll just see them. They'll just inhale like, oh my gosh, there's the smell. You can tell they're just captivated by the scent. Those are just a few things with my dogs that of course, I like the ones that aren't afraid to wander over in the brush and aren't clingy. I don't like dogs that just bark, but I like ones that bark for a reason, and they're very free with their bark for a reason. I remember a dog that most people know, Porcupine Mountain Ben. I called Adam. Adam picked him when he was like 3 days old because he was the only one with brindle with white trim, and I called him when he was about 5 weeks old, 4 weeks old, and Ben would just look at me right in the face, and he'd just bark at me like Baxter. And I said, I think this one's going to make it, Adam. He he would just look at me, a little guy, just look up at me and bark. Ted would do that. This prime dog, I can name dog after dog. I actually tried to get Adam to out of that second litter to keep Deuce. I said, you ought to keep this one, take this one, Adam. He says, I really like this big black one with the big head. I said, Adam, you need to keep this one. I really like this other one. Well, Junior Maynard got Deuce, and that's, I'm sure Junior's happy that it worked out that way.
Well, this is, man, I have really enjoyed this conversation. There's a lot of good stuff in here.
Well, I hope there's some things in there, especially the new guys, because this is a great sport. I mean, there's nothing more natural than a guy walking through the woods with a dog. It's the most peaceful, relaxing thing. And obviously success makes it even more enjoyable when you can get a pup and raise it and get what you want. So hopefully some of those comments about puppies and not unintentionally teaching them things that you don't want them to do later will really help some guys out. So, yeah.
All right, well, that's about all the time we've got for this episode. But yeah, I really appreciate you coming on here and giving us your time. Uh, I'm sure a lot of people are going to get a lot from this episode. I got a lot from it myself. So,
Well, that's great. Anytime.
all right, well, everybody, take care and keep wearing out that boot leather. I just want to give everyone that's listening a sincere thank you. Getting this podcast going has been a project. I really hope you're enjoying it, and if you don't mind, give the show a good rating and review wherever you're listening to it at, or share it on your social media to help get some traction. I appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to your feedback.